no, no, to the no, 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 yeah, to the no.
So The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 tells the story of a group of motocross racers that end up stranded in the Nevada desert and preyed upon by the survivors of the cannibal family. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Wes Craven review series. If you're just now joining me, I have started reviewing every single film in Wes Craven's filmography, and we're going to go all the way down to the end, eventually ending in a ranking of every single one of these guys' films. So, if you're a fan of Wes Craven, or if you're a fan of The Hills Have Eyes in general, of which I will also be reviewing the remake and the sequel to the remake, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the carnage to come for the next couple of weeks. So yeah, we are at this forgotten sequel of The Hills Have Eyes, one of the original Wes Craven classics, one of the movies that put him on the map, one of the movies that Craven fans and cult horror fans have celebrated for decades. You barely even know that there's a sequel to this movie, and I've always wondered why. I've always wondered why you never hear anything about the sequel, and I found my fucking answer. So after watching this film, I did a little bit of research, looked into the production, looked into the legacy of this film, and it turns out this was very much a paycheck film for Wes Craven. His previous film, Swamp Thing, did not go over very well, did not financially succeed on the level that he hoped, and he literally had to take a movie to keep the lights on, and The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 was that film. It was put into production, it was given a production budget, they shot 2/3 of it, then the production was halted by the studio that was not feeling very warm and fuzzy about the amount of money that they were spending on this film and how much return they were going to get, and it was not actually released in theaters until after the success of Nightmare on Elm Street, and Wes Craven's name had a little bit more clout behind it. And I will tell you, for the amount of movies that I have seen from Wes Craven, now I still have quite a few to go, but this, by a landslide, is not only the worst Wes Craven film I've ever seen, it is the only film that I've seen from this guy that genuinely feels like he just stood behind the camera and said, do whatever, I don't give a fuck. So starting off with the positives for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, of which I really only have one, and that's that it's cool to see Michael Berryman back again. It's cool to see Pluto back. If any of the original family was worthy of coming back and getting another shot to chew up the scenery as a villain, it was him in the role of Pluto. So it's cool to see him back. Not necessarily that he gets a ton to do in this movie that merits his return, but as soon as I saw him in a shot where he's got the binoculars and looking down, I'm like, hey, he survived the dog bite. Fuck yeah. Now moving on to the laundry list of negatives with this film. How is this not a Friday the 13th film? You watch this movie, and I swear to God, the first thing that I did after finishing this was message my buddy CP, who is our local Friday the 13th fanatic, and I said, have you ever seen The Hills Have Eyes Part 2? To which he said he didn't even know that there was one, which goes to my previous point about this weird sequel that people don't even know exists. And I said, dude, if you threw Jason in this movie, nobody would ask a single question. I mean, this movie is shot like a Friday the 13th movie. It is paced like a Friday the 13th movie. It is focused on just setting up random who gives a fuck characters just to kill them all one by one in the third act, like a classic Friday the 13th movie. It even has the same fucking score. And I had to do research and said, hey, it's actually Manfredini. It's the guy that made the score for Friday the 13th. No wonder it sounds fucking identical. And the whole movie, I just kept watching it going, did I click on the wrong film? Because I mean, if Michael Berryman didn't show up to set off in the middle of the movie that this was actually, for sure, a Hills Have Eyes movie, I would swear, I would bet money that I came across some weird unofficial sequel in the depths of Amazon Prime and I was gonna blow everybody's mind. Have you ever heard of this missing Friday the 13th movie? And it doesn't do the movie any favors, by the way. It's not like it's cool because it's played out just like a Friday the 13th film. It highlights all of the negatives of the template of the 80s Friday the 13th films, and it does it so poorly that anything that they were trying to get across as far as making this more of a traditional 80s slasher just falls on its face because you don't give a fuck about the characters, which isn't exactly something that's foreign to 80s slashers, but it's especially prevalent here. There's almost no story. The even excuse for getting them into the desert is sorry as fuck. You have villains that, quite frankly, when you're reduced to 2 cannibals, one of which is a returning character that doesn't get nearly enough to do, the other one is this random fucking guy that comes in, it just doesn't have anywhere near the dynamic, the tension, or the screen presence of the original family. And the kills are just kind of lame. I mean, if you're gonna go the slasher route, at least go Carnage Candy full. And no, there's a couple throat slashes, there's a couple of bodies found in the third act, you know, where the final girl has to walk around, oh my god, there's everybody in the cast but me! And I just feel like this movie completely loses all sight of what made The Hills Have Eyes great, what made it a classic back in the 70s, and it just borrows the name, borrows one or two characters from it, and does the most shitty thrown together sequel to the point where it's shocking that Wes Craven is the one that wrote and directed this. I mean, this is something that just screams studio wanted to churn out a quick buck, so they got random fucking film student with no credit whatsoever to make this movie that was continued off a much better filmmaker. No, same guy. Same guy. And even though it's almost a decade later, apparently Wes Craven still didn't find any fucking lights on set, because this thing is lit almost worse than the original film. To the point where you've got black actors in this movie that, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way whatsoever, you can barely fucking see them. And it's just like, dude, that's like 101 when it comes to movie lighting. I mean, you got different outfits that require different lighting to kind of illuminate what's going on. You have different skin tones. And it just feels like they just got a lamp. They just got one lamp and they just fucking stuck it behind the camera for whatever they were shooting. And there's so many night scenes where you just can't tell what the fuck's going on. You can't tell what character it is. You can't tell what's going on. There's a scene where the dog comes back for revenge and pushes Pluto off of the mountain, and it doesn't even look like a fucking dog. It looks like a guy goes up to him and pushes him. So either the lighting fucked that up, or that was actually a stunt guy pushing Michael Berryman, and they just forgot to move the camera slightly to show that it wasn't a stunt guy. There's not the crew. There's not a cinematographer hanging up in the fucking mountains. It was a dog. The movie magic. Lighting. It's required. And we gotta talk about the setup of this movie, okay? I started to cringe immediately when the first person that we see on screen is Bobby, and I'm like, oh, damn, that's good. Why, give me Porn Stash. At least let Porn Stash recap the events of this film. I don't want to spend another movie with Bobby, but luckily, he's only in it for about 5 minutes. The rest of the movie, the only legacy character that returns is Ruby. Bobby, who was so emotionally traumatized just from finding a fucking dog gutted, escaped from that situation, and then married and started fucking the daughter of the person that murdered his entire family. Ugh. Don't get me wrong, the element of Ruby now being a normal person with normal teeth and normal hair and actually consumes animals and not her species, there's an element of intrigue to bringing her back to the setting of the first film and having her re-encounter her family now that she has fully escaped the evil, and seeing how they react to each other. But the movie doesn't even really fully go there with that. So just bringing her back as the wife and business partner of Bobby, from the first moment that they were on screen together, and I knew it was her, even before they said that it was Ruby. It was supposed to be like this big reveal in the movie. I was like, that's the same actress. Is he fucking Ruby? Ugh.
If I ever get married, I have to go off to the woods of Africa and find me some crazy, naked zebra bitch.
Dude, Bobby, you have a very, very elegant little backflip there, buddy. I'm sure you could find a chick in a bar somewhere that's gonna be impressed by that. You don't have to settle for the mountain chick. So that whole setup, just along with the fact that they created some new super fuel for these motorbikes, and they're gonna go show it off at this motocross race somewhere, I guess, that we never even get to, just for them to go back and get stuck in the Nevada desert by the same dumbass circumstances. It's just like, it probably would have been better just to have another completely different cast of a family or something travel through and not have any tie to the original film, because all it did was make it weird and all it did was strain the credibility of this setup entirely. And to make it even worse, the one single element that was even halfway working throughout this movie by bringing Ruby back was her coming back face to face with Pluto and eventually with Reaper, and getting into these fight scenes with Pluto, which is actually a pretty good little fight scene. And you're sitting there wondering, like, okay, by the third act, she's going to have to come, like, blow for blow with Reaper. She's going to have to be the one to vanquish the evil forever. Something. Nope. She literally walks into a booby trap, gets knocked backwards, hits her head on a rock, and fucking dies. Yeah. And it's not even like this big, like, scene where they actually like mourn the character for a second. It barely even feels like she died. You just realize it when the credits roll and you're like, holy shit, Ruby never came back. That was her death? What the fuck?
You think this is funny?
In a cosmic sort of way, yes.
Well, Mr. Funny Man, is this how you get your sick kicks?
What? It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness!
Then you have the introduction of this character, Reaper, who is like the new patriarch for this cannibal family, of which apparently there's only two. There's Reaper and then there's Pluto, who returned from the first film. And the explanation that we're given is that Pluto is the brother of Papa Jupiter. Didn't we have this whole fucking weird isolated scene in the first film where the gas station guy talked about he had one fucked up son that killed his wife and his daughter and he bashed him in the skull and left him for dead? Think he would have found it relevant to mention that that fucking thing happened twice and there was somebody that was even more weird before or after he had this fucked up son? I mean, he made it pretty graphic. I mean, that kid came out sideways and split his wife's pussy in about 8 fucking pieces. I don't know if that lady would have enough strength to do another cannibal baby.
If I wait till you went to sleep and I'd come inside the room and cut your dick off.
Nonetheless, that's the explanation we're given. There's a fucking cousin It that just came into town and realized that everything's gone and now they're just sitting in the mountains killing people. That's literally the explanation we're given. They're not trying to survive. They're not trying to recoup the family or kidnap women to become the new mama or anything like that. No, we just kill people and throw them down a fucking mine shaft. Okay. And finally, the deaths and the defeats of both Pluto and Reaper are very underwhelming. I mean, for Pluto being clearly the fan favorite character, being that he came back, and certainly the fan favorite because everybody loves Michael Berryman, him coming back just to get pushed off the rock the exact same way that Mercury did in the first film, in such a shittily shot way too, where, okay, so the dog got his revenge. There's an element of that that's cool, but you did it in the lamest fucking way possible. You just, falls off the cliff. Good on you for coming back, Michael Berryman. Sorry you couldn't get a better sequel. And then you have Reaper, who has this moment where he's about to fall into a booby trap, and he's like, Reaper don't fall into trap like Papa Jupiter. He not stupid like Papa Jupiter. And then he's dumb as fuck like Papa Jupiter and gets blown up. First movie, the dude survived getting exploded pretty fucking easily. This guy, not so much. I mean, redundant for one, but two, I mean, if you're gonna have this guy come back as the bigger, badder, older brother of Papa Jupiter, at least make it to where if you're gonna rip off Friday the 13th, you gotta kill this motherfucker like 6 different times before he actually stops moving. Make it have some stakes at least. Nope, none. And my final negative, which I don't know whether or not to really hold against Wes Craven or not, because the studio did yank this movie from him when it was only 2/3 of the way done. The way that they decided to complete this movie was to literally pad out the remaining third of this film with flashbacks. Now, an element of that, once I got into the meat of the movie and realized that this was just a carbon fucking copy of Friday the 13th, there is an element to, within the first 5 minutes, we're just gonna recap the entire third act of the previous film. That feels very Friday the 13th, so I kind of went along with it for that one. Even though I felt it strange, they didn't edit it together at all. It was literally just like the entire third act of the first film. Throughout the movie, there's so many flashbacks that it's to the point where there's maybe an hour of new footage in this film, maybe even less. I mean, the fucking dog even gets a flashback. The dog gets a flashback. And when you're in a movie like this where you're really not having anywhere near as good of a time as you did with the first film, it's made even worse by the movie continuously reminding you of that better previous film. Overall, guys, this movie's a piece of shit. This movie was rough to get through. I was kind of surprised. You know, there's an element to it that I thought maybe even if it is bad, it's gonna be so bad that it's hilarious, but it doesn't even cross the line into that legacy. It's just a movie that, quite honestly, makes 100,000% why Wes Craven and his fans have all just kind of forgotten about this. This is just a movie he went off and made for a paycheck one day to eventually get the funds and the rejuvenated motivation as a filmmaker to give us Freddy Krueger. So I guess there's another positive, is that he had to get this out of his system to be able to give us one of the greats. But as a film, just no. So if you're a fan of the original Hills Have Eyes, just skip forward and watch the remake of the original Hills Have Eyes, because this sequel does nothing to add to the original and actually takes away from the original a little bit, which is one of the biggest sins a sequel can do. And it's for that reason alone that this is going to cross into the rare territory of me saying, fuck this movie. So what do you guys think of the Hills Have Eyes Part 2? Did you see this in the 80s when it came out? Were you a fan back then? Are you somebody that watched this and goes, what the fuck? There's a sequel to The Hills Have Eyes? I hear you. I hear you. Let me know down below what you guys think after you watch this thing, if you are brave enough to bear it. Let me know and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're a fan of Wes Craven or a fan of The Hills Have Eyes, because I'm going to review the remake and the remake sequel and do a ranking just off of the 4 Hills Have Eyes movies. And then we're going to be going on forward with all of the rest of Wes Craven's films in his filmography and ending in a big fat-ass ranking of the entire Wes Craven legacy. So stick around, check out all that carnage over the next month or so, please. Thank you for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.